155 years ago today, the Parliament of the United Kingdom passed into law the British North America Act, affirming the country we all now know as Canada. For people of the former colonies, there were fireworks and parties. But as we were starkly reminded last year around this time, the situation for Indigenous people in this land was quite different. And with the growing recognition of that, does celebrating Canada Day feel different than it once did? Can it really coexist with reconciliation? Let's get into that with Susan Dion. She's Associate Vice President of Indigenous Initiatives and Professor in the Faculty of Education at York University. Karen Pugliese, Executive Editor of Canada's National Observer, and Ron Stagg. He's a Professor of History at the now renamed Toronto Metropolitan University. And it's great to have real people in the studio. So nice to see you all again here. Canada is 155 years old, Ron, but Canada Day certainly is not. What's the history? How did it start?
It's really a reflection of where Canada is at a particular time. So, Confederation, 1867, 1868, the Governor-General said to everybody, hey, let's celebrate this. It wasn't official until 1879, and there were lots of people who were not happy about it.
Who?
Particularly people in the Maritimes and particularly Nova Scotia. They felt that they had been tricked into Confederation. There was also opposition in Quebec from some people who didn't want to be part of Canada. And of course, there only were the 4 provinces at the time, so you had a lot of opposition. That gradually faded and then came back in the 20th century. But in the meantime, in the 1890s, the mania for empire developed, reinforced by very large immigration from Britain. And these people thought that Canada was British. So the first real celebration was 1917, the 50th anniversary, First World War. They were really celebrating British Canada.
Okay. Canada Day means one thing to one group of people. Karen, I presume it means something else to Indigenous people. What does it mean to Indigenous people?
Well, I mean, there's such a mixture, right? Like, I mean, I think if you were to talk to some Métis would tell you that they probably feel very Canadian. You've got Haudenosaunee who are sovereigntists and don't recognize Canada at all. They'll talk to you about the two-row wampum, and it's this beadwork that has 2 lines down it that's a treaty that show that these 2 nations walk side by side but never meet, and they don't accept Canada. And in between that, I think you've got a lot of sentiment in between feeling Canadian, feeling alienated as Canadians, feeling that you've been treated unfairly, to not recognizing Canada as having any authority over you.
What does Canada Day mean to you?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's very conflicted for me. I think that there's both pride and shame exist simultaneously in the existence of Canada.
Pride in what?
And pride and shame.
Pride in what?
Oh, pride in what? I think there's some pride definitely in what it means to be able to live in Canada and have the freedoms that being in Canada and being a Canadian includes some freedom, for sure. And so there's that pride. I'm a Two-Spirit, Canadian, and there's certainly some recognition that having those freedoms are important. But there's also, as I said, there's some shame as well.
Well, let's follow up on that. I mean, there's got to be more than some shame. I presume it is a deeply held view in your view.
Yes, yes. And I think that it's critical that we begin to acknowledge, and much more broadly and much more deeply, that there is a lot to be ashamed of. And we need to have, I think we need to have both, and we need to acknowledge both.
Let's take a look back at 2021, and we'll just start with this. Last year, many Canada Day celebrations were scaled back or canceled after unmarked graves were announced at former residential school sites, and Canadians were asked, do you feel, with all the questions about Canada and its historical record, it would be best to cancel Canada Day this year? Okay, here's what a poll found. This is Léger Post Media from June of 2021. 14% of Canadians said, yeah, let's cancel it. 77% of Canadians said, no, let's not cancel it. 10% unsure. Okay, let's come out of that. Ron, was it appropriate to cancel celebrations last year, as some did, given what was going on?
I would say no, but the celebrations should have been more than what they were. And that's, as I said, Dominion Day, Canada Day really reflected where Canada was at the time. In the 1960s and 70s, they started having these big multicultural festivals on Parliament Hill to say this is a new Canada. So it's time to move on to a new Canada. It's time for the federal government to address the issue and address it at Canada Day.
Time to move on to a new Canada.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, Susan?
Oh, I think that that's an interesting, a new Canada, because I think for us, we like to think about the old and what this land was prior to the existence of the state that's been imposed on this land. So, as Karen said, we are nations, right? The relationship between Canada exists with First Nations, with an S, right? Because we were and are independent nations, and we never gave up our sovereignty. So I think that's part of what we need to learn and celebrate, that right. We are actually more than two nations, right? The founding nations myth, it is a myth because there are many First Nations that existed here long before and continue to exist. It's funny, I remember those celebrations. I remember going to the park and seeing those celebrations, and even as a 6, 7-year-old thinking, there's something not right here because there are all these people, but what about us? Mm-hmm. Where do First Nations people fit in this celebration of the multicultural Canada? There was, at that time, there was no or very little recognition of the First Nations. So I think that it's critical that we actually take this time, Canada Day, to learn about the history of the relationship, and that the wampum belt and the two-row wampum that really reflects the relationship that we entered into as sovereign nations with Canada. It's a great opportunity for Canadians to learn what and who we are with this complicated and complex history.
Do you have any difficulty with the way that's been characterized?
Not at all. As I say, New Canada, to me, we're going to add another layer. We added multiculturalism. Now it's time to acknowledge that you have over 1 million people in Canada who have differing views of what Canada is, and that all has to be acknowledged.
And predate 1867.
Yes, very much so.
So do you accept Susan's position that it is a quote-unquote myth that the French and English founded this country?
The French and the English founded a political entity. They didn't found a nation.
Gotcha. I think you two are coming together a bit on that. I think we're having a bit of consensus here. Karen, take a look up there at the screen, and here's an image from Parliament Hill on Canada Day last year. And when you turned on your television set, as I presume you did, like many of us, to watch July 1st celebrations, what did you see?
Yeah, okay, so I watched on computer, but that's all right. That's what all the kids do these days, right? Yeah, I mean, seeing that meant something to me, and I have to put that in context that I'm a journalist, and so I've spent, I don't know, 20 years covering this. I started at APTN, now I'm at Canada's National Observer, and when I go out to cover stories today, whether it's on education, or child welfare, or clean water, or housing, I could literally just do the same story I did 20 years ago and not see any change. And Canada just kind of goes along, just sort of ignoring these important issues. So for me, seeing all these people in orange shirts show up on that day, I found it touching because they weren't our people. And they were trying to show some sort of allyship, showing that they finally just got, you know, the pain and the hurt and the unfairness and the systemic racism. You know, like, to me, that's what it showed. Having said that, I've heard from some survivors who said, well, you know, it's great if you want to put on an orange shirt and, you know, run around on Canada Day or an orange shirt day. That's fine if that's a token of your allyship, but we actually need real change. And that's maybe going to motivate some discussion, but it has to be more than that. It has to be more than a day, and it has to be more than one day where you put on an orange shirt for some quiet reflection.
There could have been many opportunities over the years for that moment to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It happened last year, really, I think, for the first time. What, in your view, was the tipping point?
Yeah, I think it was the discovery of those graves, right?
That did it.
You know, I had thought this, and I heard an elder say it, so it's like, I think a lot of people thought this, that the children were waiting to be found. I don't know if you'd found those grave sites in like 1980 or 1990 or 2000, that Canadians would have been ready for the full impact of it. It kind of had to come after a TRC. It kind of had to come after everything about the TRC kind of quieted down, because you had this big moment of the TRC and then nothing. Like, it kind of like, it was kind of going the same way I think that RCAP went. That you have this discussion start and it just kind of fades. The media starts covering it. It gets out of the conversation. And then the discovery of those graves really made it real to people in a sense that they could imagine their own children going off to school, not coming home. And years later, still not knowing what's happened, but suspecting that this is where they were laid to rest. And that, I think, just connected with people in a way that nothing else could, but it almost had to be that moment.
I suspect you and I are the only ones here old enough to remember 1967 and the centennial and the sort of unabashed, complete enthusiasm of the population, well, English, French, and multicultural populations in expressing love for Canada and how wonderful all of that was. Should we just come to terms with the fact that we probably ought not to be doing that anymore?
I think we should be doing, but we should be doing more. I mean, right now, recent Canada Day celebrations, we had tokens. We had Indigenous people in costume. And the government's very good at tokenism, but they got to follow through.
Follow through means what to you?
It means using the occasion to talk about reconciliation, to mention some of the things that need to be done, and then to follow up on that. Obviously, you're not going in the middle of a celebration, you're not going to go on at great length about this, but it's an opportunity to raise the issue and say, we haven't quite got there yet.
That's the thing, Susan, that I think people are trying to figure out how to do. They want to celebrate Canada and be happy about the fact that we are, objectively speaking, empirically provably, one of the great countries in the world today, relative to what's going on in a lot of the other countries. But we're not there yet. We're not where we need to be. How do we do both at the same time?
Right. I mean, I think that we have to acknowledge when you say it's a great country, like, who is it a great country for? Because certainly there are a lot of Indigenous people who don't experience, you know, the Canada that you experience.
For sure. But you could say that about every country in the world.
Yes. Well, yes, but we're talking about Canada. So I think that it is, you know, I think on the day, there's a time to also celebrate Indigenous culture and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and that we need to have that time for celebration. And as Indigenous people, we celebrate. We have lots of joy and celebration of our relationships and relationships with family and community and land and our own nations. So I think that time for celebration is important, and it's a time to learn about who Indigenous people are and what we have and who we are, and learn about us And there is also a time to learn about the relationship and the complicated relationship that has existed between settler Canadians and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people.
Okay, fair enough, but is that a Canada Day mission or is that a National Aboriginal Peoples Day mission, which we had just a couple of weeks ago?
Right. I think that it is September 30th is also the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I think that that's a very important day for learning about the history of the relationship. I think that we need to complicate how we understand and what we make of Canada Day. When I see those images of people waving flags, you know, there is some pride, but there's also a lot of pain when I see those. And I think, well, who gets to wave that flag and feel good about Canada and feel good about being Canadian? Because I know that for a lot of First Nations, Métis, Inuit people, we don't get to feel that same, flag waving pride, because that's not what Canada has been for us.
Well,
so,
if you want to complicate it, I'm going to complicate it even more. You ready for this? Because, as you were suggesting, for a lot of people in this country, every Canada Day before this one was unambiguous, wave the flag and feel great about being Canadian. But then we just saw, several months ago, a trucker convoy in Ottawa where there are a lot of Canadian flags being waved, and that flag took on a new connotation. And for a while, Karen...
Thanks for giving me the easy question.
For a while, non-Indigenous Canadians started to look at that flag and say, oh, wait, that's become the new symbol of this trucker convoy, freedom convoy, call it what you will, who have a very different view about this country from the vast majority of others. Do you think that changed the way people saw the flag?
I have heard that it has changed the way that people see the flag, or at least Canadians, non-Indigenous Canadians. I've heard that. I've heard some statements about take back the flag. But while everybody's fighting over it, let me just give you the context in which Indigenous people have used this flag. And I'm sure you've seen this. Upside down, reconciliation is dead, written all over it. Yep. And sort of a giving up on reconciliation. So I can't really tell Canadians how they should feel about their flag before or after the truckers' convoy. And I think that's a discussion that maybe for Canadians need to have amongst themselves. But what I can say is that it hasn't been a welcome symbol for Indigenous people for a long time, and it's been used as a symbol of protest, a symbol of broken promises, a symbol that the government's not living up to reconciliation. Which, by the way, it's a loaded word, right? Because what does reconciliation mean? You're going to hear some people say it means listening. But that's not how the TRC defined it. In South Africa, they defined reconciliation as forgiveness, but that's not how we defined it in the TRC in Canada. They said very specifically, much like Ron said earlier, that it's about breaking down Canada and rebuilding it in a new image, like all these institutions with Indigenous people involved in them, making something together that serves all people without the shadow of white supremacy in it. And so, but young people are losing faith in it. Like, I feel like this is a moment that could slip away from us so easily. And we could just evolve into a country where Indigenous people try to stand up for their rights and then get arrested at gunpoint. And this just keeps going on and on. Somewhere we've got to break out of that.
Ron, let me get you on the flag. Post-trucker convoy, do you look at the Canadian flag with an extra level of complication that you perhaps didn't before it all happened?
I would say yes, but I'm not going to let somebody take away something that represents what we are. So to me, this is an aberration. This is a protest. I work on protest. And they were purposely trying to say, this is really ours, and the Canada we want is this. Well, I don't want that Canada, so I'm not letting them take that.
The Canada you don't want is the Canada where a few hundred people can show up in Ottawa and insist that the Governor-General fire the Prime Minister and overturn the results of an election. That's not your Canada.
No, not really.
Is that your Canada?
No.
Okay, just
No,
checking.
not at all. Not at all. And sometimes when these conversations make me think about, the flag is a symbol of what we could be and what we need to be. Mm-hmm. Because there's a story that is attached to that flag, but that story is not what actually exists. So I think what we need to do is think about, well, what do we want? What do we want that flag to teach us, to prompt us, to provoke us to actually act in service of new and better relationships between settler Canadians and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations. I think that we're taught as in school to have this great sense of pride in the flag, but I think what I'm hearing people say today is that that is a myth, and that what we need to do is do a lot more teaching about the relationships and about what we want for all people who live on this land to have what we think Canada is, and what some people get to enjoy as Canadians, but not what all of us, experience as, being Canadian. So I think that, I see it as kind of almost like a provocation to do the work. Because, like Karen said, reconciliation has not, we actually haven't acted to accomplish reconciliation, and that's the work that we need to do. And so I see it as, a moment of possibility where we could accomplish what we hope it represents.
Let me ask you directly, we're at the hour now where the sun is going down and the fireworks are going to start in full swing. Does seeing all of that on our television screens over the next couple of hours set back the attempts at reconciliation?
It doesn't set them back, it just ignores them. And that's what I'm saying, the key thing. Government has to take a stand on this. Government's very good at tokenism. As an historian, I can teach my students about Indigenous ways of doing things, about their place with regard to Canada, but that's a small percentage of the population. The largest group, there was a recent survey said that 62% of people thought that they knew something about the residential schools and things like that. Oh, what does that mean? Somebody's got to stand up and say, and it's got to be the government, look, here's where we're going. As they say, you can't do it at Canada Day, but you can announce it at Canada Day. You can talk about it at Canada Day.
Can I look at the bright side of that for a second? 62% means 38% don't know, which is concerning, but 62% is probably twice as many people who, if you asked the question 10 years ago, you would have got a very different answer.
True, but how much do they know? Oh, I've heard about graves. I've heard about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What was it anyway? And it was something about reconciliation. So we've got to get beyond that.
And I think that's exactly it. We have to get beyond that. We have to get beyond, this, knowing this much and thinking that's enough. There was something about the discovery of the graves that, in Canada's response to the discovery of the graves, that was so unsettling for me, because we have known this history all along. We've heard these stories from our parents and grandparents. We knew that there were children buried. We knew this.
We didn't.
And no, exactly, you didn't. But it's not because we didn't tell you. We told Canadians, and there was something that made me so angry about, so now you're gonna believe it. Now you have, scientific evidence. You wouldn't believe our words. You wouldn't believe our stories. You would just believe the scientific evidence. So there was something about the response that kind of made me very angry, because what I want is that deeper engagement, that deeper, yes, we need to start by listening to the voices of Indigenous people, but we also have to act Canadians have to take action and say this existing relationship is not acceptable any longer. It was never acceptable, actually, and we need to take action to change the relationship and recognize the sovereignty of Indigenous people.
Can you tell us, though, what July 1st, today and going forward, ought to look like in a way that includes Indigenous voices without the kind of tokenization that we have heard about today?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's July 1st and there's the rest of the year, so let's start with July 1st, because I want to pick up on something Susan said. But I mean, yeah, I think we talked about, like, it's nice to have Indigenous people participating in the ceremonies and celebrating our culture, but there has to be some marker of history, some recognition that, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying that Canada's a good country. It's made some terrible, terrible mistakes. All countries have. And this is something that we have to work through. And just not pretending that, like, everything's perfect for a day, right? But there's also, like, the year round, because, like, Susan was talking about, like, that anger. And it's like, I get so angry. And I try not to operate from a place of anger. I try to operate from a place of loving my people and hoping things will be better. But there's those moments, when the TRC came out, it did do a report on the unmarked graves. And I went back and took a look at who covered it. And you know who covered it? Aboriginal People's Television Network. Where the hell were the journalists? The entire time that residential schools existed, where were the journalists? And then this report comes out, and in my mind, I was thinking, did they not cover that report? Because it was really, you know, in terms of journalism, don't bury the lead, unmarked graves, missing children, deaths. Like, this should be like the lead of a story. This should have been something shocking that got a lot of reporting. And the Indigenous Television Network did it, and I didn't see, I searched for it. I couldn't find anybody else covering it. So if they did, it was very minimal. So what, did they not believe the report? Why did reporters not cover it? So I feel like Canada's been in this veil of denial. We're getting a lot of pushback now from disinformation sources saying that, you know, the graves don't really exist, that it's all some sort of scam. And so I think we really have a lot of work to do in media to keep, you know, more than 2% of the stories about Indigenous people, not just about residential schools, but about all the issues of inequity that are still existing. Like, there's an accountability aspect to journalism where you're supposed to be holding people's feet to the fire. And we're not doing that. Like, journalists are failing Indigenous people in this country. And like, I also did, I took a look at, like, the percentage of coverage of Indigenous people in a couple of newspapers. And I found that since the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Women, it has dropped from 5% to 2%. It is going down, not up, which is the wrong direction. And I know Journalists for Human Rights are putting out a report probably in the next month or so. And I expect that it's going to confirm that and show that there's been a dive in Indigenous coverage, because I'm seeing it, you know.
That's a good challenge to put out to the rest of us, so thank you. That's Karen Pugliese. She's executive editor of Canada's National Observer. Can we thank her, as well as Ron Stagg, the history professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, and Susan Dion, professor in the Faculty of Education at York University, associate VP Indigenous Initiatives at York University. It was a real important conversation, I think, for all of us to have on this Canada Day. So thank you for coming here to TVO tonight.
You're welcome.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.